My name's Iggy. I've been riding for 40 years. My dad rode bikes. We always had bikes in the house. My dad was a mechanic, and there was always, everyone in the neighborhood had bikes, and there was something in me that connected with bikes. When I was about 12, I said to my mum, right, time for me to get a bike. And my mum said, you will never ride a motorbike through those garden gates. And being the intrepid young man I was, bought one in boxes and brought it home. My dad and I built it in the shed. So I never technically rode it in the gates, I actually technically rode it out. Oh, there's a few in the stable. Some of them just followed me home accidentally, but mostly Suzukis at the moment. I've got this little Honda behind me, which I have a real close emotional connection with. And just recently bought a 2007 Triumph Scrambler just to do a little bit of sort of soft road adventure riding kind of stuff on weekends. And funny enough, it's been the bike I put the most Ks on in the last little while. But yeah, there's a few classic Suzukis in the shed as well. They are Suzuki GS1000S models, and I've never seen one in the flesh, but I remember when I was a kid growing up, and one day I was working at a shop and a customer came in on one, and I walked outside and saw this beautiful blue machine, and my jaw just hit the ground. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life, and the guy was really generous with his time. He spent half an hour with me telling me the backstory of Wes Cooley and racing with Pops Yoshimura back in the day when a superbike series was just kicking off and what have you. And I came home and Googled it and just fell in love with the story. The particular ones that I've got there are quite rare. They didn't make a lot of them. And the two that I have there is a 79 and a 1980 model. The 1980 is actually the rarer of the two. They made a lot less of them. And they're really quite easily distinguished by a couple of small things, but from a distance, they're the only bike that came out in the Suzuki range at that time with the factory rear sets, which made them suitable for the track. Under the covers, it's bigger cams, electronic ignition, bigger carbs, just general bigger porting through the motor, higher red line on the dashboards, another little very subtle thing that you can find and pick up. They just built enough of them to be classified as a production bike and used as on tracks around the place. The 79 model, they made quite a few more of them, but they're probably a little bit more iconic because they were seen more readily because they made more of them and a very desired bike. And personal opinion, but I kind of prefer the paint job. It's a little bit more special, I think. For those in the know, you'll pick up very quickly that the color schemes are the wrong way around for the frames. And that was because a friend of mine that I bought the bike from actually restored that bike to look like a bike that his brother owned when he was younger, and his brother was quite ill at that point in time. And although it's wrong for that bike, I actually feel it's part of the bike's history, and I actually don't want to mess with that history. Pretty much at the same time I bought that bike, I stumbled on the very rare occasion of being able to find a 1980 model. So I ended up painting that one in the 79 colors, even though it was a 1980. So I've still got kind of the pair, so to speak. And once again, only the experts will really tell the difference from a mile, but I just don't really want to mess with the other bike there with its history and why it is the way that it is. Absolutely, been doing it my whole life. My dad spent a lot of time in the shed at home. If I ever wanted to spend time with Dad, really the only time he was ever talking to me is when I was standing next to him tinkering on stuff. And it started off with lawnmowers when I was about 6, and particularly once I got my bike when I was 12, I already knew how everything worked from working on all the mowers and the car motors with Dad, and it's just kind of in me. I suppose I'm a really optimistic person. Every time I see some derelict pile of junk, I see nothing but the potential that it could be, and I just want to give stuff a go. I want to know how things work. So these projects around me, most of them I've done all the work myself, even the electroplating and the spray painting and the building of everything, basically. Spoke wheels on some of the bikes, etc. Even if I don't know how to do it, it's an opportunity to learn a new skill and go and ask somebody and learn, and that's made a lot of friends around the world, and yes, it's a pretty cool hobby. I have a real sense of pride. especially in the one that I've done most of the work on. From what it looked like before to what it is now, I'm really proud of that bike. It's the best work I've done ever. So I have a bit of that. I feel an enormous amount of respect and privilege to be riding it. It's no other way to put it, really. I love the fact that wherever I park it up, people want to come and chat. That's always a cool thing about having something that's a little bit rarer and nostalgic for people that they connect with. But one of the things that I guess it's not just those bikes, but older bikes in general, is that I often use the word agricultural to describe them, where everything's really kind of direct and mechanical as opposed to digital. And while I appreciate all the technology that goes into the digital products, I actually really still like that raw feeling of feeling the bumps and that kind of sense of urgency you get from carburetors and where the motors still ran on harmonics as opposed to electronics that governed everything, and having to pick your gears and work the bike. There's a lot more rider feedback, I think, that comes from the older bikes in general. So I tend to just have an enormous smile on my face and just get in my happy place, really. It's probably easier to start shaving away the things that I don't like, and that's city riding and highways and things like that. The first chance I get off a major highway, the happier I am. Last weekend was away with a few mates through the Kapiti Valley, and most of those roads are 80 kilometers an hour. It was just visor up, smell the smells, feel the temperature changes, listen to the sound, listen to the engines, and just take in the scenery that was around me. And it's food for the soul. They just charge the batteries up. It's the best way I can describe that. When I moved to Australia and bought my first motorbike here, was a 1981 Yamaha XV1000, and I bought two of them. And I met a couple of people who had bikes, and they were telling me how they rode to Phillip Island every year. So my best mate is a biker in New Zealand, so I rang him up and said, how about we do an adventure? You buy the ticket, get yourself here, I'll get these two bikes ready, and we'll go to Phillip Island and be part of the pilgrimage, as they call it, down there. And without hesitating, it was like, yep, I'm in, done. So he rides an R1 top spec thing, and when he arrived, I kind of looked and thought, oh, this is a bit of a downgrade from what he's used to riding. And I said to him, mate, sorry about this. I know you're into the modern bikes, but this is what we got. And he looked at me and he said, mate, riding with you, I will go anywhere. You can give me a 50cc. We can go just outside of Sydney and break down and spend 10 days on the side of the road, and I'll have the best holiday ever. And it stuck with me. It was such a lovely thing for a friend to say to you. And a few years later, I heard about the Scrap Heap Adventure Challenge, which basically is a fundraiser and an awareness raiser for Down syndrome in Australia. And essentially it was a challenge to build a bike, get it registered and on the road for under $1,000. Well, to me, that is music to my ears. It's doing something good. It's a crazy adventure, and there is the challenge of what I can do on a budget. So I rang my mate up and said, remember? When you said to me, you'd be happy on a 50cc that broke down just outside of Sydney and spend 10 days on the side of the road. Can I test our friendship? And once again, God bless him, he went, yep, I'm in. So I bought a couple of really old Hondas. They're not really up to highway speed, so it meant we'd really need to be traveling back roads, and it's the same motor that's in the Honda CT125 ag bikes, so I figured we'd get spare parts anywhere if we actually broke down. Brought it home, spent about $50 on plugs, points, condenser, fired straight up, and just did a top to tail, changed a few bearings just to get it right. So under $1,000, got this thing done. Built a couple of carriers on the back, and we were self-sufficient for 10 days. So food, water, fuel for the jerry cans, our bedding, tents, chairs, pots, pans, cookers, you name it, all strapped to these two bikes. And so we just jumped on the bikes, and we just got to head north and see where we came across. And it was literally just stopping in a pub, and somebody's going to come up and have a look at the bikes, and you chat and you say, this is where we're going, what can you recommend, where can we stay? And we just met people who said, come and crash in our barn or in our paddock, or we stayed at a couple of pubs, and odds and ends along the way, camped a bit just on the side of the road, and had the best road trip ever in the history of the human race. I have never enjoyed myself so much. It really drove home that you don't need to spend the big bucks. You don't need to have the fanciest, flashiest bike in the bike club to enjoy classic biking. There is a $600 bike that brought more smiles to more people than any other bike I've ever met. And to this day, I'll put fresh fuel in that, I'll give it a kickstart, and I will ride it around the country. It is as reliable as, it doesn't need any maintenance. It's just an awesome bike. I love riding. There's one thing we haven't really spoken about today, and that is my shed, my workshop. So I was fortunate enough over the years to have had a lot of friends that have really good workshops, and when I didn't have one, they were really generous about letting me use their spaces and do things. So when I moved into this house a few years ago, I felt like I wanted an opportunity to give back. So this shed is anybody that wants to come and work on their bikes here, use my tools, as long as you respect the place, the people, etc. This is a great place to hang out, and it's also a safe place for people to talk, and you will hear a lot. Thank goodness we're talking a lot about mental health and just the opportunity to unload and speak to people. So this shed is a place that I like to think of like that, where people can come and hang out, just zone out, bring a project, hang out, talk, cry, whatever you want to do in here. And so everybody's welcome in here. And one of the little things I do for the people who hang out here regularly is provide them with their own beer mugs, personalized beer mugs. And as a token of how welcome you are in here anytime you like. I've had one.
Oh, no. Oh, that's awesome.
There you go.
Man. So we have a, yeah, that's awesome. Bike Talk etched beer mug. Etched? Is that etched in there?
Yeah, it's made with a Dremel.
Yeah, nice.
My wife just
So I'll have to come down and join you for a beer.
That's the rules.
Done. Thanks, man. That's awesome.
You're welcome. Do it.
Mate, that is fantastic. There are some pretty amazing Japanese bikes from the late 70s. Click this link over here to see a video with Seamus and a bike that I would love to have in the garage, the mighty Kawasaki Z1.